We'll say good morning. First of all, welcome on behalf of Gallup. My name is Brandon Bustede. I'm Executive Director for Education and Workforce Development here. And I'm delighted to be able to present with a number of friends and colleagues. As you can see, the agenda is going to be a packed and very exciting one on a subject that probably is as important as any, thinking about the important linkage between higher education and work. And so I'm just going to say a couple of very brief things. First of all, huge thanks to many partners who have been part of this project. This has been an incredible collaboration. Gallup has played a small role in this in the grand scheme of things, but huge thanks to our partners at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, to Strata Education, and to AIR. All four have been instrumental in making this work happen. And I'm going to introduce Derek Redelman in just a second, but we were here a couple weeks ago with Strata Education announcing the first report, which will be an ongoing series of insights coming from a project that is as exciting and large as I've been involved in. It's a daily poll of U.S. adults about higher education. We are interviewing 350 U.S. adults each day. That adds up to about 10,000 a month and a little over 122,000 a year. And the research agenda is focused on a number of things, but what the first report focused on, which is still very fresh findings, was the degree to which people would go back and do some part of their education path differently if they were given the chance. So we queued the report off of three key questions. If you had to do it again, would you go back and get a different degree? So degree level, would you go back and attend a different institution? Or would you go back and change your major, do a different field of study? So think about how all of you would answer that question, right? Any of those that you'd go back, how many of you in the room would redo at least one of those three things if you had a chance to redo it? It's fascinating. So 51% of U.S. adults, we reported, would go back and redo at least one of those things. Not surprisingly, the one that they regret the most is major field of study, followed by institution, followed by degree in terms of levels of regret. But here's the interesting thing I want to tell you about the report as a theme to introduce today. There were four categories of U.S. adults who had the lowest levels of regret about their education choices. And I'll let you think about the themes, but here's the four that had the lowest levels of regret. First, U.S. adults with technical certifications or degrees. Those with postgraduate degrees. Bachelor degree holders who were STEM majors. And U.S. adults who graduated from college at the age of 30 or older. Those are the four groups that had the lowest levels of regret. Now, I'm going to let you think about what those four groups have in common. And with that, I'm proud to introduce one of my good friends and colleagues, Derek Redelman, who's the Vice President of Research and Policy at Strata Education. He was previously Vice President for Education and Workforce Development at the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. And with that, Derek, welcome to the stage. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Brandon. It is. Don't mean to sound this way, but it's great to be back in this particular room, the great room, great hall. We have done a lot of projects here and look forward to many more with Gallup. Strata Education Network is a nonprofit public charity based in Indianapolis, formerly known as USA Funds. We got started as a student loan guarantor, helping literally tens of millions of folks to access college. Now completely out of that business and focused on a mission that we call completion with a purpose, as we are trying to employ philanthropy, research, and innovative products to help make better connections between education and work. About 3 years ago, we initiated what we have referred to as our college value portfolio. The idea behind that was we were recognizing that states all have this tremendous database of information about education and workforce outcomes that most are not using, some not at all, and some to only small degrees. And we wanted to help those states to employ that data to be helpful to both policymakers and higher education leaders, but also to consumers of education. Launch My Career was a partnership, started as a partnership that we helped forge between the American Institutes of Research, AIR, College Measures, Gallup, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. And so far have been launched. Their products have been launched in 3 states, another one ready to go, others with interest, with some very promising opportunities to leverage that state information to be helpful to the consumers in those states. The rollouts of these products have attracted a lot of great attention with state leaders, chambers of commerce, other community-based organizations, several of which you will hear from today. But ultimately, our hope, and we're beginning to see some good evidence of this, is that these products will become of most value to the consumers themselves. And that's where the program starts today. And we have a video to kick that off.
I'm so happy I found Lauch My Career. It has helped me so much. What I found out through the website was so many things. I found out, first of all of the admissions, how much it cost, and it definitely helped me choosing what major I wanted, and connecting it to the school I wanted to go to. I was at an internship with Junior Achievement. They asked me if I could go to the computer lab and take a look at the website. They said, oh, choose whatever major you want. It brings up options, and it brings up options with colleges.
But here I am. Okay, so I'm going to, now this is too loud. So my name is Mark Schneider. I'm the president of College Measures and a vice president and institute fellow at the American Institutes for Research, which is the owner of College Measures. And somewhere there should be a slideshow coming up. Everybody nods. Yeah. All right. There we go. So, as Derek noted, okay, I have a mic that I turn on. So Launch My Career was a product that we started working with in conjunction with many states. The goal is to take information that states have been accumulating by looking at the wage outcomes and career outcomes within the state using unemployment insurance wage data. And states have been doing this often for decades. And the fact of the matter is that they've been burying that information in all kinds of weird places, usually in the bottom of a desk drawer someplace or the electronic equivalent of that. And several years ago, with the help of various foundations, including Strata, we went to several states and we said, you have these data, help us liberate them. Help us get them into the public domain. And many states stood up. We've worked with 7 or 8 states now, and the 3 of them that Derek mentioned, Colorado, Tennessee, and Texas, are partners in this new version of Launch My Career. We had other names for these various products in the past, but Launch My Career is the most current version. And I'm going to highlight some of the things that we used to do, and I'm going to tell you about the newest version that we're rolling out in all our partner states. And it's really fundamentally different and interesting. So the building blocks of Launch My Career have been the same for a long time. They're the hot jobs. What are the jobs that students can compete for? Hot jobs for us are not only jobs that are growing in numbers, but also have high wages. So when we ask students, right, we've seen endless numbers of these surveys that ask students what they want from college, and 90%, 89%, 92%, depending on the survey, they want good jobs and family-sustaining wages. Hot jobs for us are the identification of those jobs that are going to be growing, that pay family-sustaining wages. The second building block for all our work is high return on investment. We tell students all the time, right? College is an investment in your future. States invest in higher education as a human capital development. Investment. So if we talk about investment, then we need to talk about the return on that investment. And I'll show you later about some of the ways we're doing that. But it is hot skills that are the transition point for us at the current time. This is what we're trying to emphasize, because this is the distinguishing characteristic that students need in order to get those hot jobs and in order to earn family-sustaining wages. So hot skills are the key point. So I live in this really weird bubble, and this line, 65% of tomorrow's jobs don't exist today, is something that I hear all the time. But then when I go out in the real world and I ask people, have you heard about this? They all look at me like, I never heard that. So how many people have heard this line? Okay, so we all live in the same bubble, right? So 65% of tomorrow's jobs do not exist today. No. That, by the way, is an urban legend. Okay? So what happened, this is the way it worked. There was a random sentence in a report in Australia, Department of Labor in Australia, that said 65% of the jobs of tomorrow don't exist today, right? A major, beautiful headline. Got picked up by the New York Times, became certified as reality, and it has gone round and round and round and round. Okay? I want you to do a thought experiment. I want you to think back 20 years, right? Yesterday. Okay? And think about the jobs then and think about the jobs today. Think about what's happened in those 20 years. Okay? In 1997, Amazon was a bookseller trading at $2 a share. Just broke $1,000 a share. Google did not exist. Uber did not exist. Twitter did not exist. Facebook did not exist. So we have lived in the 20 years a major revolution in everything. Think about the jobs 20 years ago and think about the jobs today. Are 65% of today's jobs didn't exist 20 years ago? So unless the rate of acceleration of technology is going to be so radically different that 20 years from now all the jobs will be different, like for me this is just bogus. But what really is true is that many jobs will require a different set of skills to get and to keep and to advance. So for me, the discussion about skills becomes the most important discussion that we need to have. Skills add to the number of jobs that a graduate can compete for, and they add to the wages that people could command. So the task for us in our new iteration, our new work, is to help identify those skills. So the skills really matter in terms of the jobs you can compete for, the wages you get, and those things, the jobs you start with, the wages you start with, determine the trajectory of your earnings. It's actually a very sad but true fact that if you start low, you're going to end low, and if you start high, you're going to end high. So we need students to come out of the gate fast and strong, because that's going to determine so much of the earnings for the rest of their lives. So adding skills to a course of study pays off today and tomorrow. So this is what we've been working on. So I'm going to show you some examples of labor market effects of skills in the state of Tennessee, one of our longtime partners. And then I'm going to show you how the new version of Launch My Career, which we're going to be rolling out over the next few months, take advantage of this new information. So here, for example, is data from what happens if you add skills to liberal arts associate's degree. Last year, there were 257,000 associate degrees in liberal arts, right? That's the SIP code, the Classification of Instructional Program, 257,000 of them. About 40,000 more in general studies, and maybe another 50, 60,000 in related fields. So remember, the AA in liberal arts was designed as a transfer degree. Students come in, they expect to transfer to a 4-year degree and eventually earn their bachelor's. 6 years after starting an associate's degree, 16% of students have a bachelor's degree. So most students who start with this idea of a transfer do not transfer or do not earn the bachelor's degree within any reasonable amount of time. So the object here is to try to identify skills that could be added to that AA in liberal arts that will in fact turn it from a transfer degree that often doesn't lead to transfer, but leads to higher paying jobs. So we've identified, working with Burning Glass, we've identified the skills in Tennessee, that could be added to an AA degree that increase the marketability and the wages. So the blue lines are the number of additional job postings that someone with this set of skills and an AA degree can compete for, and the orange bar is the added bonus salary, the added salary that students could compete for with this skill added to the AA degree. So by the way, supply chain logistics, $32,000 doubles the expected wage of an AA, of a regular AA degree. $28,000 just about doubles that. So these are the kinds of skills that could be added to the AA degree to make it a marketable skills degree. Here's another one, adding skills to business finance associate's degree. So these degrees pay more than the AA in liberal arts, but they still don't pay a whole bunch. And here are some skills that could be added to the AA in business and finance, and the number of additional jobs and the added wages. The 32,000 is about what someone with this AA degree could expect to earn. So this is also doubling it. So we do the same thing for bachelor's degrees. We have the same kind of information about what kind of skills could be added to, in this case, healthcare administration and public health. So again, we see 3 skills here, the number of added jobs, and the substantial $42,000 bonus for business processes and analysis. And here's one for economics and public policy, project management, an additional $14,000. So our database is rich. These are just examples of the kinds of data that we are generating that are identifying concrete marketable skills and the expected bonus in terms of additional jobs and additional wages. So what we're trying to do is take these data about marketable skills, right? How marketable are different skills, right? And we're trying to add them, we're adding them into the next version of the Launch My Career site. So we're going to maintain the emphasis on hot jobs, high ROI, but I'm going to show you the whole track that we're building in about marketable skills. So this is a mock-up of what we're going to roll out in Tennessee in the next month. This is going to be the prototype for what we could do in Texas and Florida and Colorado. So Tennessee hot picks. Highest ROI programs, they're specific programs. So if like this tells you where the highest ROI is for any program in the state. Hot jobs, I mentioned those, top majors and top schools. This is the ROI page that you get. So this says, for example, business administration at a state college. This is $581,000 additional dollars in additional earnings, and 5 years to launch. That means, I'll show you what we mean by launch. That means that how long it's going to take you to achieve your lifestyle goals that you want. If you are in the job market, you're a returning worker, for example. Every state that we work with is really concerned about workers coming back. You know, they may have some college, they need to be upskilled. So this is how many years it will take you to recoup your investment in earning that degree or that credential. So these are so this is like the key to our ROI. And again, it could go from 5 years for an undergraduate, 8 years for a returning worker. These are just examples. And this all is keyed to the particular program of interest. So this is for general business administration. And this would exist for the hundreds of programs in the state of Tennessee. So you can't read that, but there are these buttons that are called personalize my numbers. Okay, and what happens with that is that a lifestyle goal calculator pops up, and we ask 5 simple questions about the lifestyle that you want. And you answer these questions, and they're like a reality check. So we take the answers to these questions, and we bump them up against the census. And it says, like, if you want, you know, if this is what you want, this is the kind of life you want, if you want a big house in Austin, Texas, and drive a BMW, you're going to need a lot more money than if you're living in Plano, Texas, and, you know, you're bicycling to work. So you answer these questions, and what happens is that we now have we estimate how much you need to achieve that life goal, and then we recalculate the numbers of time to launch, et cetera. So the toggle skills is the newest part of this deal, okay? So basically what we do is, depending on the area that you're majoring in, we have a set of skills that are associated with that major, right? And we end up with a list of skills that are possible that you should consider adding to that course of study. And each one of these skills, just like I showed you in those bar charts, each one of those skills has an added salary bonus. So you select one of these skills, right? And what happens is then it gets added back into your it gets added back into your ROI calculations, which now radically change depending on the skill that you've chosen. So remember, this was 5 years to launch and $500 and some odd $1,000 with a general business administration degree. We'll toggle that skill. It's now 1 year to launch and over $1 million in added earnings. And you could go down the list of skills, and you could see exactly how that changes your ability to launch your career and launch your life. So basically, that's what we're doing. And there's a goodbye slide, but there it is. Okay. So we're trying again. So the new emphasis for us is all about skills and identifying marketable skills and giving students concrete directions to what kind of skills should be added. The one caveat that we need to have, right, is that if 65% of the jobs are not going to change, but 65% of the skill requirements are going to change, the one message that we need, I think is incumbent upon all of us, is actually a twofold message. One, college students skills matter, right? Skills matter. And the second part, skills are never locked down. We need to tell all our students that the skills that you need to launch, which are going to determine a hell of a lot about your life, are not going to be permanent skills. You are going to have to upskill, reskill. You have to be committed to constantly training, retraining, reskilling, and upskilling. So we have excellent information about what the skills of today, tomorrow, and maybe next year are. But that's going to change. And it's incumbent upon all of us to keep on that message. You have to keep finding out what skills are hot, what skills are needed, and you have to accumulate them. Thank you.
ever invest $100,000 on something without knowing the risk or opportunity that comes with that investment? Of course you wouldn't. But in some ways, that's what a lot of high school graduates do when they choose a university, a degree, and a career without understanding the dynamics and outcomes of their college investment. But this is your future we're talking about. You need to be absolutely sure that you're making the right choice. And not just about your degree. This will impact the level of satisfaction with your career, how long you'll be in debt, and how soon you can reach your lifestyle goals. And LaunchMyCareerColorado.org was designed to help students just like you make a well-informed decision about higher education. Take it from me, I've been out of college for 6 years, and I wish there was something like this when I applied for college. So I'm going to show you how this intuitive application can lead you down the right path based on Colorado colleges, popular degrees, hot jobs and skills, and overall how to get the most out of your college investment. First, let's assume you know what job you want. For this example, we'll say you want to be a registered nurse. By typing in the job you want, you can see tons of valuable information right away, like the first year earnings associated with that job, earnings over time, and how many jobs are available now, as well as what's projected for the future. Dive a little deeper by selecting the affiliated degree with that job and a school that offers that degree. This
Okay, all right, that's done. Hi, I'm Kim Clark. I cover higher ed for Money Magazine, and I'm here to help introduce some folks who are actually using this tool. And I think it's especially interesting that we're here looking at actual data and facts in a city in which there's a debate as to whether facts actually change people's minds or will actually impact decisions. So I'm going to invite our three panelists to come on up. We have three folks who are actually using these tools. We have Amelia Bozeman, who's Executive Director of the Business Education Partnership of Rutherford County in Tennessee, which includes Murfreesboro, and they offer lots of great programs like free summer camps for kids that help them figure out what they want to do for their future. We have Laura Crisco, who's Director of Design and Implementation for Texas on Course, right, at the University of Texas, which trains counselors and also offers some programs to students, right? And we have Robin Wise, who's President and CEO of Junior Achievement for the Rocky Mountain area. And they also have many wonderful programs for students of all ages to figure out what they want to do in life and give them various life skills. So I'm going to ask each of them to talk about, in alphabetical order, to talk about what they're doing and how they're using the tool, and to just counteract a little bit of Mark's belief that what you do defines your future. I'm going to ask each of you to tell us where you went to school and what you majored in. Yeah. So do you want to start?
Yes, I'm Amelia Bozeman, and my bachelor's is in history. And I graduated from Austin Peay State University after spending some time at University of North Alabama. But I have never actually worked in my major, although I am a first-round draft pick for Trivial Pursuit.
Do you want to tell us about how you're using this?
Oh, yes, of course. We love Launch My Career. Our foundation exists to help prepare students for the workforce, and we work with K-12 education in our county, and we are really very much full circle when it comes to education. We have programs that work directly with students, with educators, with administrators, and with school counselors. And at the heart and the core of everything that we do is our belief that students need to see more real-world examples of what they are hearing in the classrooms, and everything that we do works toward helping them connect those dots between what their teachers are saying and how those skills and concepts translate into real-world careers. And we've used Launch My Career aggressively in each of our programs. We can talk about how school counselors have really been needing and asking for a tool such as this for a long time, but we didn't have the capacity to develop it. So we were very, very excited when Launch My Career launched. It's been a fantastic way for students to really figure out their options. My favorite thing that we did with Launch My Career is something with our high school seniors in our Youth Leadership Rutherford program. We had them study the Strengths Quest book. I don't know if you all are familiar with the Strengths Finder book, but this is for students. And once they identified their top 5 themes of strength, then we used Launch My Career in a very in-depth study so that they can research careers in which they could use their natural strengths. And they really spent some time on this, did a deep dive into Launch My Career, and we followed that up and accompanied it with interviews and job shadowing with real people who were doing those jobs they had researched with Launch My Career.
Yeah, you shared with me some of the presentations, and you can see that the kids are really opening their eyes like, oh, I really don't want to be a teacher. It seems like a lot of work. So it's really great that they are learning that at 17 rather than 27.
Well, and some of them, their decisions to become teachers were affirmed, but they went into it with their eyes wide open, which makes a big difference. One thing that we do with our students is really talk with them about the pitfalls of college debt and how little fun it is to begin your professional life strapped with a huge load of college debt if you're in a career that's not going to produce the income you need to pay off that debt. And I think a lot of young people find themselves trapped in that. And Launch My Career is really going to do something to help kids really go into life with their eyes wide open. The lifestyle calculator is my favorite feature of this, and it's something that is useful with any age group. Any time we can get students started thinking about their careers is a good time. In an elementary school setting, start with the conversation, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the student will say whatever they want to be, and then take them through those steps of, well, you need to go to school to get this certification or this degree. And then, of course, with our older students, we do a much deeper dive with it.
Laura?
Sure. So I'm Laura Crisco. I'm from Texas OnCourse, which is out of UT Austin. And I actually went to UT Austin for my undergrad and majored in something entirely different than what I do now, in advertising and Spanish. And then I realized that I absolutely did not fit in the advertising world when I tried it after college. And then actually became an advisor for the KIPP schools, and that's when I really got involved in this work, and then went back to graduate school for education policy. So Texas OnCourse is a legislatively funded initiative, and we have a similar mission to probably a lot of you guys here, which is to help students to get on a path to college and career success. So in Texas, in 2013, we changed the graduation requirements for students graduating from high school completely. So we moved back from the 4x4 requiring students to take 4 math, 4 science, 4 history, 4 social studies, and instead asked them to pick a pathway in 8th grade, so sort of like a meta major. They could choose STEM or business and industry or liberal arts. And we saw that people were very confused. 8th graders making that decision was really challenging, not only for the students, but also for the parents and also for the counselors. Like Mark said, we have great information in our state, but the counselors didn't necessarily have that information at their fingertips to use with advising students. And so in the next session, the legislature passed House Bill 18, which charged UT Austin with developing the Texas On-Course initiative. And so some of our core offerings are training for counselors and advisors. And this relates to Launch My Career directly because we have curated a set of resources that are available for students and parents and counselors, and are training counselors how to actually use them in their practice. Because we know, it's great to have this, amazing tool that does everything that we want it to do. But if it's not understood and counselors don't know how to integrate it into their practice, it won't be used effectively. Same thing with students as well. So the second part of our initiative is targeting resources to middle school students directly, because as I mentioned, middle school students in Texas are charged with making this pretty big decision that could impact their college and career choices in the future. And so we've developed a set of resources, one being a career exploration game. So it just kind of gets kids excited about learning about different careers. And I think it works perfectly with a tool like Launch My Career, because the game gets them, excited, helps them to find new things that can help them to search and use Launch My Career more effectively. And then we're also developing curriculum for the middle school teachers to implement in their classroom so that they can effectively use the tools and embed it in the lessons that they're teaching. So in Texas, they're required to provide some sort of college and career curriculum in middle school, and so we've targeted our resources to be used within those classrooms.
Robin? Good morning, Robin Wise. I'm so glad to be here because I had a dream that I got a call. You called me to say, "Are you going to be here?" And it was like 8:45, and I hadn't even gotten out of bed. So glad I'm here. I am a University of Nebraska graduate. I have a double major in journalism and political science. I wanted to be governor of Nebraska, and that has never happened. I think I've learned too much about politics. I can't do it. But I did practice as a reporter for a while until I was counseled by an editor that while I was a good writer, I was way too gullible. I just believed everything everybody told me. And which has led me to this career. And I've been the CEO of Junior Achievement for 26 years. So I kind of say it's my way to serve. So I'm not the governor, but at least I'm serving the state and serving, I think, the country. Because we focus on building young people who are financially literate, who have an enterprising spirit, and are ready to come to work when they get that job. So we use Launch My Career. When I learned about this, and you saw a little bit of Jeanette, which is a perfect example of why I am so flipping excited about this whole the website, but what it could do if every state had this. Jeanette wanted to be a music major, she thought, and she was looking at the University of Northern Colorado and on Launch My Career, and discovered that really there was no ROI for her. I mean, it was really negative. And she's a first-generation college student who, her parents would have had to put a lot of money into her schooling. So anyway, she goes through this thing, and then she decides, well, maybe I could be a business major. Of course, she's a Junior Achievement student, so we hope that she would be. But now she decided she was going to be a business major. She looked at a better school for business than UNC, although UNC has a great business school, Montfort College of Business. But she's going to go to DU, at Denver University, a private school, got a scholarship, many scholarships, and she'll have a much greater return on her investment being a business major. And she knows that she could go run a theater. She can go, and she's actually starting her own nonprofit for a theater group from the high school that she grew up in. So anyway, she's just one story. And we use this tool in a number of ways. We do job shadows for high school students, and then they will use Launch My Career to find what careers might have interested them during that job shadow. But then I think the most powerful way we use this and is after we have this program called JA Finance Park. It's in about 21 cities. But the kids arrive, it's for middle school or high school students. We'll put 20,000 kids through this year. They arrive and they get a job, and then they have to go around this park and make a life for themselves. They have to get transportation, housing, furniture. If they have kids in their situation, they have to get clothing and stuff. But after they go through the park, and they may have they're randomly assigned jobs. You might be a barista, or you might be a butcher, or a welder, whatever. The most powerful thing after this is that they can get on Launch My Career, and they can explore that job that they received in their situation, or they can explore jobs that a friend of theirs might have received. So I can't say enough about this tool.
Right. Since we're here in Washington, where politics is everything, I wanted to ask if any of you have noticed any concerns by some of the schools that are analyzed with this data, where the data finds that maybe they don't offer a good ROI. Are you seeing any pushback from people or from institutions that are being perhaps hurt by this data?
Yeah. Well, I'll start because I'm in an institution. And to be clear, so even though UT Austin is where Texas OnCourse lives, we're sort of in a bubble. We're not necessarily connected to the admissions team in any way. And so we are 100% focused on getting quality information out to students, families, and counselors. So there has not been any pushback in saying, hey, well, we don't look as good here. I mean, the data is the data, and I think we respect that.
In Tennessee, are you getting any concerns from any of the institutions that maybe show them not to be such a great investment?
I have not experienced that personally. Our area is home to Middle Tennessee State University, MTSU, and we actually did some outreach with the Jones College of Business advisors there, and the dean is very much on board. And as a business school dean, he's looking at how MTSU stacks up against other institutions, and he looks at ways to be more and more competitive. We happen to have a great university in our home area, and so that's the example that we use the most often, and MTSU happens to give a really good ROI, so that's not been an issue.
Sometimes the data also shows that some of the community colleges, as Mark pointed out, people don't.
Well, I think, as you said, the data are the data, and I think that they're great opportunities for any institution anywhere to measure itself against competitors. Competition is good for everyone, and it raises the level of everything. It's a great opportunity.
Robin, any issues in Colorado? No?
Not that we see it in the work we do.
And I would just add, I mean, I think it's just a good opportunity also as the tool becomes more well-known and more institutions may see themselves on it, just to create more dialogue around affordability and the outcomes for students.
And I think all of you have programs for different ages of students. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about whether you're seeing any indication that certain kinds of tools or applications are more powerful at different age, for different ages or stages.
Oh, definitely. As I mentioned before, if we are doing something with younger students, say elementary age kids, it's easy to have that conversation. What do you want to be when you grow up? And then take it to, well, if you want to have this career, you need to get this kind of degree or this kind of certification, and here's what you can do. I think that to a second grader, talking about your ROI is going to be a little over their heads, but it's not too early to get them thinking about preparing. And I think to your point about first generation college students, Launch My Career is an incredible tool. We all know kids who were basically born on third base, and unless they try really hard to mess up, they're going to be all right. Their parents are educated, their parents are successful, and they're providing that guidance. However, there are a lot of students whose parents have not experienced that educational attainment. They have not had the careers that are satisfying to them personally, and then sometimes parents are just not engaged or absent. So Launch My Career is an opportunity to really help students level the playing field. We believe that education is the great equalizer, and Launch My Career is a fantastic tool in helping kids figure out how they can get their own lifestyles at the level that they want. I think that a good education will change a child's life forever, and the financial trajectory of that child's entire family will change forever. So we love Launch My Career.
You mentioned the lifestyle indicator or whatever, lifestyle calculator. Is that more powerful for middle school students or high school students? I mean, is there any age group where it's most powerful?
It's powerful for them all, but it's really great to see the high school students as their jaws kind of drop when they think, oh, I want to be an underwater basket weaver, and you go and, oh, that's not in the list of hot jobs. I might not be able to be employed as an underwater basket weaver, and it is a sobering conversation to have with them, especially when we start talking about student loan debt. There are a lot of wonderful occupations, careers, even callings that don't pay all that much. It doesn't mean that they're bad choices. It just means that students need to know what they are getting into and not spend money on an Ivy League education to make $40,000 a year. It's just not smart. And this is a tool that we have to help them realize that.
What about you? Any age?
Sure, yeah. So our resources that are directed to students are for middle school students. And so we were thinking a lot about how to just excite the middle school students, because often you put a data tool in front of middle school students, you may not get that much enthusiasm immediately, or you need a little bit more coaching from the teacher to get them excited about it. And so for us, when we were thinking about, as I mentioned, we created a game, and you guys can all go to it in its beta version right now at middlegalaxy.org. That is the website. I can share it later. But essentially, we use the same data. We use the Texas Workforce Commission data to create hot jobs within the game. And so kids can kind of explore the skills needed by matching, they're on another planet and they're matching cadets to certain missions. And so it's fun, or it's designed to be fun, and we're improving it right now. Like I said, don't judge us too hard yet. It's in its beta version. But I think that was really important for us in thinking about how to engage the students. We also worked with this group the Institute for Applied Neuroscience, and they were kind of guiding us in how middle school students think about these things, which was really interesting. And then I'll just say a quick anecdote from when I was an advisor and this tool was not around. I would often have conversations with students and their families about, hey, I'm really interested in being a preschool teacher, and I'm looking at this private college. And
Yes.
while this public institution that is 30 minutes down the road had an excellent program, the private college seemed just more exciting to the student and the family. And it was really hard to get the numbers in front of them to show, like, look, this is really what it's going to be like when you graduate. So this really fills the gap of, communicating that message to students. So that's really exciting.
What about for junior achievements? Do you see any age appropriate uses of the different tools?
Definitely middle school, but it has to be connected with relevance. And that's why we talked about the JA Finance Park. After they go through that experience, it becomes real to them about what it costs to live. And I think the job shadowing or the JA Finance Park or any career exploration in conjunction with this is very powerful. But it has to be relevant to them before it really, I think, clicks.
Okay.
Can I just add one more thing? I was just thinking, and I didn't mention this, I think it's all about the real world experience and connection. We can't just rely on these tools or even this game. It has to be a personal connection with a teacher, an advisor, or someone to help them through it, because all of these tools and the game that we provide, it's just a priming mechanism for deeper conversations. So the people are so important.
And I will say, the kids, it's easy to navigate. In fact, when Jamie and Mark and when we first launched this, they were like taking the kids through it, and the kids were like way ahead. So this is very easy to use, but I think it is the conversation with a volunteer, with an adult. And I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that a counselor will do this, because there aren't enough counselors in school districts to work with kids. So I think pairing with community groups to get this into kids' hands is really powerful.
And even arming the teachers, like your English teacher who helps you with your college essay.
Right.
I mean, that individual is a great resource.
Right. So I'll just ask one last question, then open it up to the floor. And I wanted to ask, how can people know whether this will actually work, or that it actually is changing minds or helping people make better decisions? What's your documentation, or what are you looking for?
Well, I think that the easiest and most accessible example is the program that we did with our high school students when they used Launch My Career to research careers that interested them, and then they found real life, real world professionals who are doing those very careers and interviewed them, shadowed them, and compared what they were hearing from real people to what they learned in Launch My Career, and seeing that, yes, it is a real thing. This is relevant information that is going to help me choose what I need to do with the rest of my life. In Tennessee, we have a similar 8th grade situation where they have to choose their pathways, which is basically their major in high school, for lack of a better term. And that's a big ask of a 13 or 14-year-old, but this can at least help guide them.
But I mean, have you actually seen that? I mean, it hasn't been around long enough, but have you seen people actually changing their plans or changing their college decisions as a result?
Yes. With our high school students, of course, they just completed their senior year in high school, so we don't have any ROI to report for them yet, but definitely when they were doing their projects, when they were doing their research, they would compare, because they had to compare and contrast at least two different careers. And in their presentations, we heard, oh, I thought this was what I wanted to do. I thought this was a good idea, but now I see that I'm not going to be able to attain that lifestyle that I want with this major or this career. However, this is something similar that interests me, that if I scale up educational attainment-wise, I can reach that lifestyle goal. So yes, absolutely.
Do you have any?
Yeah, so we're not implementing directly with students, so I don't have that type of data, but we are, as an organization, Texas OnCourse is working with American Institutes for Research to evaluate all of our offerings. And so we will be releasing, a report of the effectiveness.
In Colorado?
Well, we point to Janeth, and I can point to a couple other kids that I directly know, but we're using it so much with broad groups of kids, it's kind of hard to exactly say 1 out of 3 kids. But we do know that that role models in front of young people can make a difference. And so you have all of these JA volunteers going in and talking to kids about what they do. That makes a difference. So it's the tool connected to reality.
Yes. Okay, is there any questions from the audience?
Good morning.
Hi.
So the question is for the colleague at UT Austin. So you mentioned that one of your charges is actually to develop curriculum for either counselors and moving this forward. You all mentioned, of course, still the need for humans and teachers, glad
Yes.
we're still needed, to be able to use this. How have you thought about disseminating that out? We mentioned volunteers, we mentioned parents, we mentioned college counselors.
Right.
So where are you in the curriculum development stage, and then how will it then be pushed out or disseminated? Is it
Yeah,
for
are you
profit?
in Texas?
I am not.
Okay, just
We're up
curious.
here in the district, so sorry.
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and it's a challenge, right? That's a big challenge. But we've been piloting our resources. We have online competency-based training for counselors and advisors, or the English teacher who's talking about college in their classroom. And we've been piloting that with around 3,000 counselors. And we have full-scale rollout in August. For the curriculum that you're referring to, that's specifically for the middle school classrooms. And so through the connections that we've made in piloting our competency-based training with counselors, we've generated a lot of interest across middle schools across the state. And we've also developed a fellowship program. So we have counselors we have 20 regions in Texas. And those counselors are basically going to be our on-the-ground contact and help us to get information out to the schools. And so the curriculum was developed with an advisory committee of teachers in middle schools. And so we piloted that at the end of the school year. And so we expect to roll it out at the beginning of this school year in August.
Mind if I address that? We do have programs in which we are working directly with educators. Week before last, we had our STEM Factor Conference, and it is a summer conference during which we work with our partners in business to help ease teachers out of their comfort zones in those more difficult and challenging STEM subjects. And we don't have a curriculum, but this is something that they can use to say, okay, well, if you want to work in green energy, here are some options. We do things to help connect them. Our focus of this particular conference was energy and conservation. And they can spend time with professionals. We bring people from the real world into classrooms. And then teachers can then, instead of us saying, here, this is what you need to teach, teachers can do what teachers do best, which is teach. We're just giving them another tool in their toolboxes to help reinforce what they're saying and how kids can connect that to real life.
Any more questions?
Hi, I'm David Harwell from the American Geophysical Union. I'm curious about why these 3 states, and are the other states coming? What determines where this program was rolled out?
Mark will answer that question.
We're awesome.
It's both a willingness on the side of the state and the availability of resources. So many states, at least half of the states, have been merging wage data with the student level data that's necessary. And as you may know, at the federal level, there have been various and sundry attempts to merge different kinds of data sets and to answer this question nationally. And that's still stalled. So right now, what happens is that states own the unemployment insurance wage data, which has some problems in it in terms of out-of-state coverage, and they also own the student level data, so they can merge these data with I mean, you know, there's still FERPA requirements and all that kind of stuff. So about 30 states have done that, and then again, they've put out these data in various and sundry forms. Like sometimes they do reports. You remember those things? You know, like lots of words and you know, then you get it in the mail and you look at it and throw it away and all that kind of stuff. So I was the commissioner of the National Center for Education Statistics, and when I left, I had a great Rolodex, and I went to you know, all the states that had gotten money from the federal government that I had given to create the links between higher education and labor outcomes. And I asked a bunch of states, like 20 states, would you be willing to make these data public? And 5 states said yes. And then, like Arkansas was one of our early partners, and they dropped out, in part because pushback. I mean, actually, there has been remarkable pushback because universities like to be left alone, right? And everybody thinks that their program is like the best program ever, and even if students aren't getting jobs, that's their fault, right? It's the student's fault, not the program fault, right? So Virginia has been a long distance runner with us, but the longest distance runners are these states, right? So we've done 3 and soon 4 versions of this tool with Tennessee, Colorado, and Texas. In September, Florida will be coming out, and we're negotiating with other states. One of the things that we learned early in this is that to make these data public, you can't go to the universities because they don't want it. You need a champion in the state legislature or in the governor's office, because remember, the states are investing huge amounts of money in their education, and they want. And the reason this resonates with like people like Governor Haslam is that they care a lot about the future of their economy, and they want to know that their schools are preparing the workforce of the future. So, you know, hot jobs, hot skills, high ROI resonates, but you need what we have found is that we need a champion within the states, either in the governor's office, or the state legislature.
Yeah. Somebody asked a question, well, Kim, you asked the question if we are getting any pushback. The only pushback we get, and we wouldn't get any formal pushback, is just educators saying, well, you know, there's more than ROI. And there's job satisfaction. Well, this does have job satisfaction, but that's the kind of pushback that I hear.
So just to be clear, there are more than 40 states where this data, the data exists and it would be possible to create a tool. Is that correct? But not all 50, right? Could have it in more than 40 states.
we could, and again, it has to do with political will and resources, right? So I want to go back on the pushback thing. So for a long time, people have accused me of hating the liberal arts, right? And I mean, the bottom line is that most liberal arts, fine arts, Jeanette's experience with music is a classic example. They have low return on the investment. So, like people say, well, you hate the liberal arts because you just keep showing one after another, after another, after another, after another, that, like there's low ROI for these things. Well, look, that's not, I didn't invent the world, right? I mean, I didn't say that someone with a music degree is not going to make any money. I mean, that's what employers are doing. So one of the reasons that the pivot to skills is so important is because the message that the message here is, look, major in music, right? And Jeanette is an example. Like, I'm not going to give up my love of music. I'm just going to find something that I could do that merge with music that is going to move me out of my mother's basement, right? So what we're talking about in the skills thing, remember, it's a toggle. Add this skill to what you're studying and see what happens. So there's going to be a challenge because a lot of curriculum are going to be, it's going to be hard to add these skills into some curriculum. But I think that's going to be a challenge for students to talk to their schools and say, look, if I get data analytic skills, I can make an additional $25,000, right? So tell me how to get these analytic skills into my music curriculum or into my history. Whoa.
Really loud sneeze.
The pivot to skills for me is what do you add to your love so that you could launch a life.
Well, the ability to toggle skills with the tool can really help students who are more inclined toward liberal arts. Teach them how to monetize their passion for whatever area. And yes, you can still work in music, and you can still work in the humanities. You can still work in the nonprofit sector if you add the right skills to make you more valuable. I mean, that it is what it is. The data are the data. This is a great tool because it's independent of a university. It's independent of anything else. So it's just right there for students to do with as they wish.
Let me ask one question. Isn't there a concern that this data is all backwards looking? I know you think that the jobs of the future won't be that much different, but still, I'll bet a lot of the data shows that petroleum engineers do very well, and right now they probably can't find a job, right? So how do you address the issue of the sort of historical bias?
I was just told to keep it short, which is very hard.
Right.
Being short and concise is not one of my skills. So I think the answer. The answer for me is the skills that we are emphasizing now are the skills that are hot right now.
Through postings, job postings.
Right.
Okay.
And so that's current.
Right.
But I think I think this is a responsibility for everybody in this room and everybody in higher education, is that higher education is not one and done, right? We say this all the time, but it's really our responsibility to tell students that we could help get you the foundational skills or the skills that will launch you in a career, but that it is your responsibility to keep those skills, to keep upskilling and reskilling, because otherwise you're going to be left behind.
Yes, I was curious, is there any forward look as far as adding even vocational schools, trade schools, things of that nature, which return on investment is usually pretty good because the cost is a lot less?
But the answer to that is, the answer to that is we're totally dependent on the data systems that the states have. So we have certificate programs in here, so we have anything that a higher education agency, institution in our states offers, we have, right? So we have every certificate given by every community college in the state of Colorado, Texas, et cetera. So certificates are there. In the state of Florida, the district technical colleges, which are WIOA, certified providers, are in their data set, and the data from that is really quite interesting. So the highest paid credential in the state of Florida 1 year after completing is not petroleum engineer, because I'm not even sure Florida does petroleum engineering, but I assume it does. But anyway, the highest paid credential is elevator mechanic. $93,000. Yes. And the next one, millwright. I had to look it up because I had no idea. Millwright. I'll tell you later. Millwright, and I had to look it up. These are people that build cabinets and woodwork.
Oh, okay, good.
Right. And that's like $86,000. So Florida has registered apprenticeship programs, right? And most of them right now are construction, but everybody's talking about apprenticeships in white collar jobs. And so right now, the highest paid credentials are apprenticeship programs in things like elevator mechanic. So one of my fears, and I was always that my daughter was going to want to be a welder, right? Because then she would drive a pickup truck with a gun rack and tattoos and all that kind of stuff instead of a Prius, and how would I explain her to my friends, right? But now she said, I want to be a welder. I say, hey, no, not a welder, elevator mechanic.
I love it.
Will be our last question.
So my question is, you're all from 3 different states and the data is very specific to those states. How do you deal with students who definitely want to go out of state for college? Do you just talk to them about how the data is still somewhat relevant maybe in another state, or how do you handle that question?
That's why I say this needs to be in all 50 states. I mean, it really is. The data's there. I mean, if they want to go to, Virginia, I suppose, or California, they can get online and look. The cool thing about this is it's just all consolidated, but you can, as Mark said, this data exists, but the kids who have the wherewithal to know how to find it will find it. And this just makes it so much easier for kids who don't have the help that this website provides.
We have done exercises where we use Launch My Career Colorado, and we've compared, well, this is the cost of living in Tennessee versus Colorado. If you choose to be an accountant in Tennessee, this is what you can expect as your median salary, as opposed to what you can expect if you enter this career field in Colorado and compare the ROI. We have done that. It will be great when it's in all 50 states, but we'll take it as it is right now. It's great right now too, but we've done those comparisons, and it's eye-opening for students just to know that cost of living is different in different places, and again, just opening their eyes. It's been great.
Well, do you use the college scorecard for out-of-state students or any of the national databases? Or? Right. I think we're done. Thank you very much.
The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, one of the partners for Launch My Career, and it's been a pleasure to have the opportunity to showcase to you all and the partnerships that we've created in the 3 states in which Launch has been released. We want and community-based organizations in Tennessee, Colorado, Texas, and soon to be Florida, because they've come up with much better ideas than I would ever have of how to get this tool into the hands of students. And we're grateful that a couple of those partners from the Temple Chamber of Commerce, from the Hutto Chamber of Commerce, a little bit, and that our chambers put together. Some Spanish translation guides, a 4-page overview of here's how a counselor in a traditional high school might use this tool to guide conversation with students, or if you work in a career one-stop shop and you're working with adults who are thinking about going back to school, here are some questions that can promote conversation after folks have had an opportunity to use this tool. So we've been really excited about the different types of resources that these chamber partners have come up with, so wanted to take a moment to spotlight them, and we'll get to play one for you right now, and fingers crossed we'll get all the way through this one. So if you go ahead and play that clip.
New direction, an increase in pay, to feel more accomplished, not sure what you want to do after graduation? Launch My Career Texas helps you navigate programs that lead to well-paying jobs. Isn't it time you start investing in your future? Call 1-800-NAVARRO to launch your career. Funded by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation grant awarded to the Corsicana-Navarro County Chamber of Commerce in partnership with Navarro College.
So we got through it, yay. But just imagine the type of dedication and commitment that chamber is taking, that folks can actually call this number and sit and talk to somebody about how to use this tool and how to make the most of their decision making for their next steps. So just a fantastic example. So with that, I'll go ahead and I'll invite Paul Fain to make his way to the stage to moderate our panel with our fantastic partners.
To come out. It was just a little protest, that's all. You don't have one?
Perfect. I like a microphone.
Okay, Paul, take it away.
So it's video time, right? I think.
No, the video's done.
Oh, I
it's
missed
full
the video.
queue. You're ready.
Hi.
Yeah.
I missed the video. So I'm Paul Fain. I'm your moderator. I'm the news editor with Inside Higher Ed. And just very briefly, why this issue is of great interest to us. You all know this, but there's quite a bit of concern among the public, policymakers, the news media about student debt and return on investment. And I think some pressure on higher education to get better about connecting programs to jobs, which is exactly what this discusses. So you all have been working on this project for 2 years now. I wonder if you could start with just, what are the big takeaways? What have you learned during the process? What maybe has surprised you? And I want to start with Mark.
Okay. I'll go back to actually the first iteration of this, of the work that we were doing 6-7 years ago. And Arkansas was the first state, and we did the wage outcomes, and it turned out that graduates with associate degrees were earning more than bachelor degree holders, by a couple of $1,000s. And I said, I was traditional. I used to be a university faculty member, taught in a research university, believed in the bachelor's degree, and actually it's like a bachelor's addiction. The nation believes that when we talk about college, we talk about bachelor's. And all of a sudden I'm looking at this and saying, wait a second, the associate degrees are out earning bachelor degree students. And then there has to be mistakes. So we go back to Arkansas, we said, could you check these down? No, these numbers are right. And then Virginia came in and the same thing, right? And other states started coming in. And so ultimately what began to become apparent was the importance of technical training. So it's not the AA in liberal arts that is driving the higher wages for associate degrees. It is the AA in nursing, the associates in nursing, the associates in any technology field that are starting people in solidly middle-class wages. Over time, as we did Launch My Career and as we started talking about skills, it became increasingly apparent that there are many pathways into the middle class and that the bachelor's addiction is unhealthy. If you change your thought from degrees to skills, if you change your thoughts from a bachelor's degree to middle-class, family-sustaining wages, it turns out that there are many pathways that could be followed. So the importance of this is that not everybody needs a bachelor's degree, but everybody does need the skills. Probably you still need certifications from like a certificate from a community college or an associate's degree. And I think what we need to do is we need to shift to the technical skills, the foundational skills that will launch people into careers, into family-sustaining wages. And we have to recognize that there can be many ways into the labor market, and that by just talking about the bachelor's degree is not actually a productive process for many students who either don't have the time, the money, the inclination to earn a bachelor's degree. And actually, as Paul notes, many bachelor's degrees are really expensive with high debt levels and low ROI. So we need to just, I think that what we're talking about is a shift from degrees to skills.
Next up, Cheryl Oldham from U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation.
Thanks, Paul. Is this working? Yeah. I think some of these things we thought we sort of felt like we would discover throughout this process, and we have. And so all of those things that Mark mentioned, sort of specific to various programs, were interesting and maybe a bit surprising along the way. But I think for us too, from the employer side, we do continue to talk about, and the nation is now having, this conversation, as Mark mentioned. Not everybody needs to go to college. There are lots of pathways, but I think, and that's true, but we're never gonna, the importance of information is just key to all of that, right? Like, it's fine and dandy to say not everybody needs to go to college, that there are all these pathways, but without the transparency and the information provided to people to understand what all of that is, like what are the outcomes, what are the good paths, what are the skills necessary, what is the employer community saying, that's sort of all for naught. And so that's, I just think a frustration too on our part is just that there's still so much resistance to the transparency conversation and the consumer information conversation, so that we're just never going to get where we want to go with alternative pathways and less than a bachelor's degree and all of that unless we provide that real solid consumer information, which is what we have tried to do, I think, with this tool. And, just continues to be a frustration, obviously, that we're only in 4 states. And we have chambers tell us often, oh my gosh, we want that tool in our state. How do we get that tool in our state? And it's like, well, we can try, but there's a long pathway to getting the data required in order to make, to populate this really important and effective tool. And so I think we could be in a lot of other places if states were willing to do the hard work of the data that's required.
Great. Brandon?
So I think we've talked a lot about what this additional information does in the hands of decision makers, right? Consumers, parents, students, whoever it may be choosing college. But there's a couple other interesting things that happen real fast, right? The second you realize what happens when you put this kind of information in front of consumers, there then becomes two huge questions around pedagogy, right? So what I mean by that is, as a segue to Mark's point about it's not just what you major in, but it's the skills you acquire, it's the kind of experiences you have, right? And a lot of the research that Gallup has been doing about successful outcomes for college graduates, those successful outcomes in jobs are linked to the kinds of experiences they had in college. And there's a short list of things. A job or an internship where you applied what you were learning in the classroom, some sort of long-term project that took a semester or more to complete, right? And I mean, you know, it's a short list. I just want to stop on those two. My point about that is that you can integrate both of those things into every single program and major at every degree level that exists in the United States. That's a pedagogical shift, right, about how we teach, how we learn, how we integrate working and learning, right? And that's something that then becomes, it should become a major focus at the institutional level. And then there's another layer to this, which is the accreditation layer. Because nothing is going to fundamentally change, I think, in a large, scalable way at the institutional level until there are some barriers out of the way in terms of how people get accreditation. So I'll just give you simple examples. I was with a leading college president, one of the most dynamic, fast-growing community colleges in the nation, and one of his big problems was that their two fastest-growing programs, they were actually getting penalized for as opposed to being supported. And I'll give you the two examples. One is a coding boot camp they've been running. 0% of the students who go through that program graduate. Why? Because 100% get a high-paying job. Do you see the problem here? The other one that he talked about was their digital arts program. Super low graduation rate. Why? Because every company that's looking for digital arts talent is literally sitting outside the classroom waiting for the students to come out. And they're like, oh, Mark, you're in the digital arts program? Can you sign here, please? Right? They're getting jobs. Now, on the institutional side of things, they're getting dinged because it's actually hurting their graduation rate, right? So it penalizes them on a number of different levels. And oh, by the way, because the coding boot camp isn't an accredited program, guess what, right? They're not really getting any kind of credit for that. So I just give you these two simple examples to say that there are several things that, you know, it's like chicken and egg, or like, you know, what's going to happen first. As this consumer information gets better, which it needs to get better, all of a sudden you start to say there's fundamental whole-scale pedagogical changes that institutions need to make, and then there's also, and maybe could go before this, changes that need to happen at the accreditation level. Those are huge conversations that really no one's talking about. We're not talking about teaching and pedagogy, and we're not really talking about accreditation because most people have no idea what it is. It's like this big black box, even for people who are experts in higher education. It's like, well, I kind of think I know how it works.
Right. Well, it's funny that you'd say that. Right now, across town, NSEKI, which is the federal panel that oversees accreditation, is meeting. Don't ask me what that acronym stands for, because I actually don't know. But I will be heading there next, and I've seen on Twitter that they're talking about graduation rates and bright lines, and they're still using data that just doesn't really capture any of what you discuss. So just a quick follow-up on the focus on the four-year degree, the addiction to the four-year degree. You know, Tony Carnevale at Georgetown talks about the kind of aspirational drive that a lot of Americans have to just assume that your child or you will earn a four-year degree. And then, you know, the more I get into writing about CTE, career technical education, there's a real stigma. You know, I know California is trying to rebrand CTE. They're struggling to get students to go into some of these programs where there are really well-paying jobs. Does this information, does this Launch My Career tool, do you hope that chips away at that really helps students know what's out there? Is that part of the goal? And let's start with you on that one.
Well, you know, look, anytime we've made a major national or regional effort, right, to put a focus on a particular track, right, it goes back to some of the big, hairy, audacious goals we had around getting to the moon, right? I mean, there was no doubt that enrollment in STEM-related programs and fields jumped up during that time. I mean, we're seeing a lot of effort around getting more kids into computer, programming, coding, even at the kindergarten level. You know, those efforts, we will see the long tail of that in 10 to 20 years. I mean, there's no doubt we will see more people going into computer science, given the effort we have, more people going into STEM, given the focus on that. And I do think there is a very helpful revival around CTE right now, where for probably the last 20 or 30 years, we've kind of, down-pedaled on a lot of that. And then, as we see in some of the data that Mark's been able to reveal, very productive pathways to very good high-paying jobs. And the reality is that all of us are now in this world of having to reskill, upskill. It's not just a CTE component. So, I think we need to have a healthy conversation, though, around some of those norms, right? And one of the conversations we had recently was students taking time off between high school and college. And, we call that now a gap year, right? Like people travel and they party for a year or whatever, like they're not really doing anything. I mean, I think there's very useful conversation to have around a bridge year, right? What does a bridge year look like in the form of an internship, a co-op, apprenticeship, right? I mean, do I support post-secondary credentials? Definitely. But does everybody have to rush off to it if they're not really clear on why or what or where? And so in any event, I mean, I think these are all healthy conversations, but where we put focus on marketing and productive advertising around these things, we will see more young people going into those fields and those directions, which I'm encouraged by.
Cheryl?
Yeah, and I think, there's definitely a conversation happening now post, reauthorization of No Child Left Behind, and a real focus on career readiness and what does career readiness mean at the high school level, and how do you measure it, and how do you do it well, and lots of philanthropic dollars focused on this notion of sort of revitalizing career and tech ed, which is all really important, but I think it also highlights, there are a lot of places where career and tech ed ain't so great, and I think that's why maybe we have sort of not really paid much attention to it over the years. I think it's getting better. It's not, and I think where it's done really well, it's really important and can be super beneficial. What we have said at the Chamber is career readiness is really important, but it's not separate from the academic readiness piece of the conversation, which I think often gets sort of confused and conflated in these conversations, and so it's like you're on one path or the other. And for us, I think it is, and what we've sort of termed it is college ready plus. It's you've got to have the strong academics, and then why doesn't every single high school student that's graduating have had a work and learn experience, or a work experience, or that career exposure that a good career in tech ed series of courses can provide? I mean, I don't think it has to be one or the other, and should be both in today's, in today's economy. I think at least that's sort of our view. And there are some, I think, finding pockets of places where that is done really well is really hard. We had a conversation with a great associate superintendent a couple of weeks ago out of Chicago, whose his goal in life is all 3,000 of his high school graduates will have had a work experience when they graduate, and they will have followed a career pathway, and that's the only courses that are offered in those high schools. There's got to be a connection to one of the however many career pathways they are. But you can switch, you can change your mind, you can do other things, and the academics is there as well. 900 employer partnerships in this town. I mean, this is how, and it's not like the student had to say, I'm going to choose this path versus college. It can be both or either, and I think again why that sort of consumer information piece is so important here to make those decisions.
Mark, you jump in?
So, I mean, there are many problems. Career and technical education has been debased in the society for a long time, right? I mean, it was for other people's children, not my child, right? And the story, I mean, I think there really is, even though it's a funny story about, my daughter wanting to be a welder, and then like what would happen to me, right, if she became a welder and drove a pickup truck with a gun rack and tattoos, right? And the worst part about it is she came home and she was smoking. That would be even worse, right? I mean, there's a stigma, right? I live in a world where you only have a master's degree, right? Like everybody has a PhD or professional degree. Like that's sort of the coin of the realm in the world that many of us live in. So, if you have an associate's degree, I mean, it's just like it's something wrong, right? You didn't go to, when my daughters didn't get into Princeton, I was like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me, So we have now stigmatized
You live in a bubble, Mark.
What?
You live in a bubble.
I live in a bubble, but the bubble has an effect on the way people think, and we've been, there's something apprenticeships for other people, community colleges for other people, career and technical education for other people's children, and the problem with that is, again, we want our graduates, we want our students, we want our children to have family-sustaining wages, and we have to get this information out that there are pathways into family-sustaining wages that don't necessarily run through the bachelor's degree.
Well, and that's, just to piggyback on that, because we have said, to your point about the obsession with bachelor's degree, we have said for years and years and years that that's the path. And I think the data bears out that by and large, that 4-year degree or beyond is, over time. But there are lots of other opportunities. And I think the employer, that's why the employer community is so important here, right? We value a bachelor's degree because it's supposed to mean something. It's the sorting mechanism that we use because we don't have much else. So if we're hiring for a job, we can say, somebody with a bachelor's degree, even though, do we really need a bachelor's degree to be that entry level, whatever? Probably not, but that's sort of where we've gotten to. And so I think, the more that we do have these employer partnerships, the more the employer community is actually front and center in these conversations, and through our separate body of work that we have called Talent Pipeline Management, we're actually suggesting employers lead at the conversation, that they are actually driving as the end customers and saying, this is the competency and credential requirements that I have, these are the jobs that are critical to my business, these are my preferred providers of providing that talent, and do the hard work from the employer side to really drive those partnerships and drive curriculum development and all of that.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about program level data. I've heard from community college presidents similar to what you're saying on the accreditation shortcomings, where growth programs, whether it's career tech ed, short-term certificates, the accreditors don't even really look at them. They don't get credit for, and sometimes as a result don't focus on them as much as they could. But in the media, the federal data, it's almost always about institution level. If you go to the college scorecard, you'll see a college-wide graduation rate, which frankly doesn't really add much. Can you talk a little bit about why you think program level data needs to be part of the conversation and how this tool adds to that conversation? Anyone want to take that one on?
So the evidence is crystal clear, right? With the exception of a very few schools that have sterling records almost across the board, what you study is more important than where you study it. End of story. So the program level variation is far greater than the institutional variation. So the fixation. So why do we do institution level stuff? Well, because we've sort of been trained to do that. Because you can root for the Seminoles, or you can root for the Gators, or the Longhorns, or whatever. You're not going to root for like the business program in University of Texas, right? But the fact of the matter is that the program level data is where things are happening. So Texas has a wonderful data system. So they actually have, for example, time to degree program by program. They have debt level program by program. So you could actually, which I have done, you could actually do the equivalent of a gainful employment measure at the program level. Mm-hmm. Right? So you have debt, wages, time to degree. So we compute the ROI. We can compute the ROI for every program in the state of Texas that's driven by how long it takes to get a degree. The tuition doesn't vary very much, but what kind of debt do you end up with at the end of the day? How long did it take you to get that degree? What's your wages? This is incredible information about what is going on at what students are experiencing on their day-to-day life. So here's just, here's something that's of some interest, right? It takes longer, the amount of time, the average time to degree,
for many history programs is, on average in the state of Texas, longer than it takes to get a math or an economics degree. And guess what the earnings are at the end of the day, economics versus history. So these are, I mean, for me, I'm looking at this and say, why does it take 6 years on average to get a history degree in the state of Texas? And it takes like 4.5 years to get an economics degree. Well, this is information that we all should have about the variation in the experience, which is not at the institutional level, it's at the program level. And the experiences of wages and employment and, again, debt and time to degree, that's all program level. That's all program level information that varies by program, and it gets all wiped out when we start talking about institution levels.
Yeah, I mean, and it overlaps with a lot of the research Gallup has been doing, right? So the metrics Mark is talking about, on-time graduation, right, debt load, all those kinds of things, earnings, right, as he's demonstrated, huge differences at a program level. We've seen it too in consumer ratings, right? And consumer ratings broadly defined, what have we been doing? We've been doing large-scale studies of alumni, right? Asking them about how they're doing in their work and their overall well-being. So we're measuring things like not just earnings, but in addition to that, are you engaged in the work that you're doing, right? Are you thriving in your overall well-being? How do you rate the kinds of educational experiences you have, right? So, and the point there is you see the same massive differences at a program level. So large universities where we've gotten, data broken down across 9 or 8 different programs. I mean, you can see programs that are outstanding as rated by the alumni, and programs that are really poor as rated by their own alumni. And so there's no doubt that is, the way to think about this, but think about how this works in every organization. Why would we be surprised that there's variation at program level? I mean, if any of you work for a large company or organization, you know that your world primarily revolves around who your manager is. It's a local unit level of analysis, right? And so, we know in all of our workplace research that people don't leave bad companies, they leave bad managers, right? They aren't attracted to bad teams, they're attracted to good teams, not necessarily just the brand name of the organization. So think about these large universities, even small ones, right? You can have dynamic leadership at a dean level, and I would argue that is a bigger determinant of the kinds of outcomes we see than necessarily what the content of the studies is, right? So I can show you poorly performing business schools, right, whose alumni go, yeah, that wasn't really very good. And I can show you really high-performing ag schools, right? And this is at the same campus, and guess what? If you go and visit those places, you can tell by just walking in the doors at the program level the dynamic nature of the people who are part of that program versus the other. So, but that's a layer that we're not thinking about. I mean, how do you evaluate the leadership at a program level? How do you evaluate the faculty and staff at a program level? Again, these are not things we're trained to evaluate, but we could start to teach people that that's something important to look for. I tell college graduates the most important thing that you need to know is who your manager is going to be, because you're not interviewing that company or organization. You're choosing who is going to be either a great guide for you, a great developer of you, or somebody who's literally going to do the opposite and stunt your growth.
Right.
The only thing I would add to, ditto to everything that Brandon and Mark said. And the only thing that I would add to it is this is why every single, high school student, 9th grade, maybe middle school, ought to have this tool. It ought to be integrated into some course that they're taking. And they should have to sort of play around with it and think about it and start to, think about what their path is and start to understand, have to start to think about what they want to study in 4 years and just get some information. I mean, as Mark has said, or was saying, I think earlier in the day, we're sort of agnostic. You didn't make the rules about what happens to music, majors. We're agnostic about what you study, but you ought to have the information to understand what the choices you make ultimately will yield for you. And so that's just my little pitch for how do we get this in? I mean, every single student should have access to it. I think there are lots of tools out there, right? There's obviously lots of efforts to try to get at consumer information. I think ours is probably one of the better because it does at the program level and does really focus squarely on outcomes. But until people are actually using it, and doing something with this information and selecting where they're going based on something other than, who I'm going to root for, those sorts of things. So I think the more that we can get this information in the hands of people when they're beginning to think about this stuff will be critical.
So last question for me, and then I think we're going to try to have you all ask a couple questions, so be thinking. So trying to be forward-looking here, there is, to me, a surprising new, renewed interest in Congress. As Mark knows, he testified on this issue recently, to repeal the ban on collecting individual student-level data by the federal government so they can really kind of track where students move through the system. A lot of lay people like me, when they learn this, are surprised that the federal government doesn't already know that. But it seems like, who knows? Well, it's a hard time to predict anything, but there's bipartisan interest in this. If that happens, how does that kind of overlay with what you all are doing? And beyond that, looking forward, what would you really like to see as tangible next steps for getting this in the hands of more students at the right time? And we'll start with Mark on that.
Okay, so this is like a very bubble conversation. So I want to be really careful about this. So in the background on this, for those like the elevator speech about this is the Fox Amendment in 2008 to HEOA, the Higher Education Opportunity Act, banned the federal government from holding student level data in the Department of Education. When the scorecard came out, the Obama administration had actually gotten FSA, the Federal Student Aid data set, which is about 2/3 of American students are in the FSA data set because they are in Title IV of the Higher Education Act. That is, they're either getting Pell Grants or subsidized or loans, federal loans. And the government, the Department of Education, took those data, FSA, which is, by the way, a student-level data system, and bumped it up against IRS data to get the wage information that is now included in the scorecard. So that in some ways was a hard enough lift, right? It was a hard enough lift because of the ban on student-level data. And however, it was only 2/3 of the students, and it was sort of easily justifiable because this is the 2/3 of American students that the federal government has made a major commitment to in terms of Pell Grants and loans. So there is, again, bubble time, right? There is the Student Transparency Act that is now gathered bicameral and bipartisan support. And a lot of people are assuming, and in it there's a sentence that says, the student unit record ban is lifted. So now and people think that this is like, okay, this is going to pass because it's getting a lot of attention, and this is going to be like, tomorrow we'll have a student level data system. No. Okay. And there are many reasons why that won't happen. Some of them are just like, oh my God, like these things don't spring up from the mind of God, right? I mean, there's an incredible amount of work that has to be done, technical work on doing it. But even more fundamental is that, for example, IRS, again, total bubble time, the IRS law that governs the use of taxpayer data prohibits the use of much of the data in the way that people in education want it used. So to get the full benefit of having IRS data merge with student level data, guess what? You have to rewrite the IRS law. And guess what? The Senate Help Committee doesn't control that. Or the House Education Committee doesn't control that. Ways and Means would have to rewrite that legislation. Okay, so Mrs. Fox goes to the head of Ways and Means and says, could you please rewrite the IRS Title 28 so that we could use your data? Okay, imagine the outcome of that discussion. Or Senate Finance, could you rewrite that? Could you rewrite it? Same thing with VA, DOD. census. The use of all those data systems are governed by different laws that were written to protect and govern the use of those individual data systems. So even if the Transparency Act passes, the word in there is the Commissioner of the National Center for Education Statistics shall coordinate with DOD, VA, Census, IRS, SSA. Well, coordinate? I mean, what kind of verb is that?
So what was the point of the ban?
Privacy. I mean, obviously this is all rooted in privacy.
If it's lifted and it doesn't matter anyway.
Well, I mean, this is why I think that everybody's getting so excited about the Transparency Act. And my cynical take on this is that verb is like, okay, sure, right, good luck.
So in that context, what would you like to see kind of the next couple of years in terms of building this momentum?
So the momentum is building, right? I mean, sooner or later, something's going to happen. So I think right now I'll apologize again, bubble. I mean, so right now I have a very large scale project where I am working with the National Student Clearinghouse, the DOD, VA, Census, IRS, trying to assess the impact of the post 9/11 GI Bill. Which is $71 billion spent on post 9/11 benefits, and we cannot tell you anything about what that bought. And part of the reason we can't tell you is that the VA owns some of the data, the DOD owns other parts of the data, blah, 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 blah. We've been at this for 7 months, since December, so 7 or 8 months, and what we have are a beautiful set of MOUs and not one piece of data. Right? So what I would like to happen is I would like my project to move forward, which it is at a snail's pace, and I would like other projects that are actually proving that we can merge these data, that nobody dies, right? That we can find useful things, and then what I want to see is the facts on the ground to change, to show that in fact student level data can in fact give important information to policymakers, to students, to veterans, to whoever. I don't think that just standing up and saying student level data, you ban, get rid of the ban is going to work right now. I think we're doing that, but I think we need more facts on the ground.
What about how do we get, so if we're not going to get it at the federal level, how do we get more states to do what the states, with the handful of states have currently done? Like, what does that look like? And I know, it's a huge slog, but is there something, we had a little bit of this conversation recently, is there something the department can do to signal, like part of, I think, the sort of knee-jerk reaction on some states is like, oh, we can't do that, there's privacy issues, or the department won't allow it, or I don't know, all sorts of lawyers get involved, and it comes to a screeching halt. Like, is there some sort of like sub-regulatory guidance or something that could be given by the department to say, oh, actually there is no, like, you're not flying in the face of FERPA and you could actually do this? Because I think at least doing this state by state, I mean, granted, you don't get sort of the, cross-state, collaboration or whatever, but tell me if I'm wrong, but everything that I keep hearing is most people don't actually go that far from home, frankly, when it comes to this. I mean, we're obviously a very mobile society, but, by and large, the statistics say you don't actually really go that far. And so it's absent anything else, it's really useful to have these state-by-state pieces.
So 90% of students go to school in the state that they're in, and about 80% of them go to school in the same county or the contiguous county. So yes, this is a problem. Interstate mobility is a problem for maybe UT, Austin, certainly a problem for the Ivy Leagues, which like 5% or 6% of American students are in these, in the elite schools, and they'll be fine, right? but it's the students that are going to community colleges and that are going to the regional campuses that are going to schools nearby and are intending to find work in their state or in their county, that these systems are perfectly adequate for. I mean, it's in some ways like it's not the ideal world, right? So there are, I mean, so I have worked with 8 states. None of them have been dragged into court. I have not been arrested. Nobody in the Tennessee Higher Education Commission or the Texas Higher Ed Coordinating Board, none of us have been served with subpoenas. None of us have been arrested. Obviously, the facts on the ground say that states can do this, right? They have to work out the MOUs between the Department of Labor, who owns the workforce data, and the education people. But this can be done. It's actually not hard. It's not hard.
That's a hopeful note. As a strategy, right, I don't think any of us should wait for the federal government to figure this out, right? I mean, or frankly, state government to figure it out, okay? And it's not because I'm just, giving up on the idea. I just think there's actually an immediate hack to both the federal and state level systems. And that is that any program, business school, whatever, any program and any institution of higher education today could immediately audit how all their alumni are doing. They could send them a survey and ask them the questions. And those people can choose to share that information, right? And that can be reported instantly by that institution. So, I mean, there's no reason to wait, right, on the federal level systems because there's ways around this. People can self-report how those outcomes are doing. Individual consumers, right, in this case, alumni and current students, can self-report those things. You can aggregate that at a program level. You can aggregate that at the school level. So if somebody really wants to create a new ranking or rating, right, it's going to be driven by voluntary participation by individual institutions, and it could even happen at a program level. So you could choose to do it. If the university isn't on board, your program could choose to do it, and you put that data and information out there freely. That's a huge step forward. So we've got a lot of different levers we can pull, right? I would love to have all the levers pulled, right, because we know we're going to learn more and more and more. But I mean, that's an instant hack to, the alternative of waiting and hoping for, some sort of meaningful change at a federal or state system level. We know how difficult those systems are and some of the regulations around them. So if universities really want to get serious about this, they can put their own numbers up.
All right, so some bad news. Your moderator asked about federal student data sets, and as a result, we did go through your questions. We have to wrap up now, but I hope you can give a big hand of applause to our speakers, who I think will be sticking around for a little bit if you have questions you didn't get to ask. So, thank you.
Wonderful, thanks.